The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber glowed with soft blue light as hundreds of alien representatives took their seats. The air buzzed with different languages and the sound of various breathing patterns. Some delegates floated, in containment suits filled with methane gas. Others stood on multiple legs or sat in chairs designed for their unique body shapes. Ambassador Kethvar of the Altruian Federation moved to the central speaking platform. His tall, thin frame cast long shadows across the floor. His large black eyes scanned the crowd as he raised one of his forearms to call for attention. "Fellow council members," Kethvar began, his voice carrying through the translation devices, "we have received disturbing reports from Sector 7. A new species has made contact with our outer territories." Murmurs spread through the chamber. New species were always a topic of great interest. Some brought valuable trade opportunities. Others brought conflict and war. "The species calls themselves humans," Kethvar continued. "They come from a small blue planet in what they call the Sol system. 3 days ago, their diplomatic vessel completed successful trade negotiations with the Yurlan Mining Consortium, the Bellux Merchants Guild, and the Free Colonies of Nexus Prime." Several delegates nodded approvingly. Successful first contact. Missions usually meant another peaceful addition to the galactic community. Far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the EDF horizon as stars streaked past the view screen. The ship was small compared to the massive vessels of older galactic civilizations, but it was fast and well designed. Harrison was proud of what humanity had accomplished in just 50 years since developing faster-than-light travel. "Captain, we're getting some interesting readings on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her position at the navigation console. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her brown eyes showed the alertness of someone who had served in deep space for over 5 years. Harrison walked over to look at her display. "What kind of readings?" "Multiple ships moving in formation about 6 hours ahead of us at current speed. Configuration doesn't match any of the species we just visited." Chief Engineer Ben Murphy looked up from his maintenance checklist. His red hair was messy from working in the engine compartments, and his hands were still dirty from adjusting plasma conduits. "Could be pirates. We heard rumors about raiders in this sector." Harrison frowned. The horizon carried valuable trade, goods and technology samples from their successful negotiations. If word had gotten out about their cargo, they could be targets. "Alter course to avoid them," Harrison ordered. "We don't need any complications on our first diplomatic mission." But the ships on their sensors changed course too, moving to intercept the horizon. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Kethvar was reading from a data pad. The human diplomatic mission was led by Captain Jake Harrison, a former military officer who served in something called the Martian Independence Conflict. His crew consists of 23 individuals, including Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez and Chief Engineer Ben Murphy. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" asked Delegate Zortham, whose rocky, crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights. "Very little," Kethvar admitted. "Their ship appears to be lightly armed, designed more for exploration than combat. Initial scans suggest their technology is several decades behind our standard equipment." "Then why are we concerned about them?" rumbled Warlord Gashtek, whose massive insect-like body filled an oversized chair near the back of the chamber. Kethvar's expression grew serious. "Because 3 hours after leaving Nexus Prime, the human vessel encountered a patrol fleet from the Vextai Empire." The chamber fell silent. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Vextai. They were ancient warriors who had conquered 40 star systems through brutal military campaigns. Their empire was built on the subjugation of weaker species, and they showed no mercy to those who opposed them. "The Vextai demanded tribute from the human vessel," Kethvar continued. "When Captain Harrison refused, Commander Zethrak of the Vextai ordered his ships to attack. On board the Horizon, Harrison watched as 6 large warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of them. The ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. They looked like they were designed for one purpose: war. "Captain, we're being hailed," Amy Rodriguez reported, her voice tense. Put them on screen. The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of the lead Vextai vessel. Commander Zethrak stood in the center, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been a smile. His scales were dark green and small spikes ran along his skull and down his neck. His yellow eyes fixed on Harrison with predatory interest. Human vessel, Zethrak hissed, his words translated by the ship's computer. You will surrender your cargo and submit to inspection. Your species is unknown to us, which means you have not paid proper tribute to the Vextai Empire. Harrison stepped forward, keeping his expression calm and diplomatic. Commander Zethrak, I am Captain Jake Harrison of the Earth Defense Force. We are on a peaceful diplomatic mission and pose no threat to your empire. We request safe passage through this sector. Zethrak's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. Request denied, human. Your ship and crew now belong to the Vextai Empire. You will serve in our mining colonies until you die. This is the fate of all weak species who enter our territory. I cannot accept those terms, Harrison replied steadily. Perhaps we can negotiate a reasonable solution that benefits both our peoples. The Vextai commander's eyes narrowed. There is no negotiation with cattle. Prepare to be boarded or we will destroy your vessel and take what remains. In the Galactic Council chamber, delegates shifted uneasily as Kethvar continued his report. The last transmission from the human vessel was a distress signal. Captain Harrison reported that the Vextai ships were moving to attack positions. Then all communication was lost. How long ago? Asked Delegate Morden, whose blue aquatic body floated in a water-filled sphere. 72 hours, Kethvar replied. Search and rescue teams from the Nexus colonies found debris fields at the coordinates where the confrontation occurred. Debris from the human ship? Asked Warlord Gashtek. That's the disturbing part, Kethvar said, his voice dropping lower. The debris appears to be from Vextai vessels. We found no trace of the human ship. The chamber erupted in surprised voices and clicking sounds from various species. Several delegates stood up or moved restlessly in their seats. Impossible, declared Warlord Gashtek. The Vextai patrol fleets are among the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. A single human ship could not possibly destroy them. Perhaps the humans escaped and the Vextai fought among themselves, suggested Delegate Zortham. Kethvar raised his arms for silence. The debris field suggests a battle occurred, but we have no way of knowing what happened. What concerns the Altrian Federation is that we may have just witnessed the beginning of a new galactic conflict. On the bridge of the horizon, Captain Harrison looked at the tactical display showing the 6 Vextai warships surrounding his vessel. His crew was at battle stations, but everyone knew they were outgunned and outnumbered. Captain, Amy Rodriguez said quietly, their weapons are charging. I'm reading massive energy buildups across all 6 ships. Ben Murphy's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Shields are up, but they won't hold against that kind of firepower for more than a few minutes. Harrison nodded slowly. He had hoped this first contact mission would establish humanity as a peaceful species interested in trade and diplomacy. But the Vextai had made their intentions clear. They saw humans as nothing more than slaves to be captured and exploited. Amy, record a message for transmission to Earth, Harrison said calmly. Tell them what happened here. Tell them about the Vextai Empire and their treatment of other species. Yes, sir, she replied, her fingers moving over her console. Harrison looked at the image of Commander Zethrak, who was barking orders to his crew in their harsh native language. The Vextai had made a critical error in judgment. They thought humans were just another weak species to be conquered. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first Vextai boarding pods launched toward the horizon, just as Harrison's expression changed from diplomatic concern to something much more dangerous, something that 10,000 years of Vextai military experience had never prepared them to face. In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Kethvar concluded his report with a warning that would prove prophetic. Whatever happened in that debris field, I fear we may have witnessed the emergence of a new power in the galaxy. And if the Vextai Empire has made an enemy of humanity, the consequences may reshape our entire understanding of warfare itself. 3 days passed without any word from the EDF Horizon or the Vextai patrol fleet. The silence hung over both human space and the Vextai Empire like a dark cloud. Search teams from nearby systems reported finding scattered debris at the coordinates where the confrontation had occurred, but no survivors and no clear answers about what had happened. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of Terra Command, staring at the large holographic display that showed the outer territories. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her blue eyes reflected years of military service. The preliminary reports from the search teams lay scattered across her desk, each one raising more questions than answers. "Admiral, we have confirmation from the Nexus Prime search team," reported Commander Tony Blake, her chief of staff. His voice was steady, but she could hear the concern underneath. "They found pieces of hull plating with Vextai markings, but no trace of our people." Carter nodded grimly. The loss of the Horizon meant more than just a failed diplomatic mission. Captain Jake Harrison had been one of their best officers, a hero from the Martian independence conflict who had saved thousands of lives during the siege of New Phoenix. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was the daughter of Senator Maria Rodriguez, one of the strongest supporters of human expansion into the galaxy. The political implications alone would be massive. "What do we know about this Vextai Empire?" Carter asked. "Dr. Helen Brooks has been reviewing all available intelligence," Blake replied. "She should have a full briefing ready within the hour." Meanwhile, on the Vextai homeworld of Krexthul, High Warlord Vashtek paced back and forth in his command chamber. His massive frame cast long shadows across the metal floor as his clawed feet clicked with each step. The chamber was decorated with weapons and armor from conquered worlds, trophies of the Vextai Empire's military victories over the past 1,000 years. Still no word from Commander Zetharak. Vashtek growled at his aide, a smaller Vextai, named Krixvol. "No, High Warlord," Krixvol replied, keeping his head bowed. "The patrol fleet was scheduled to report back 2 days ago. We have sent 3 communication drones to their last known position, but all have returned without making contact." Vashtek's yellow eyes blazed with anger. In over a century of military service, he had never lost contact with an entire patrol fleet. The Vextai military machine was built on discipline and constant communication. Units reported in on schedule or faced severe punishment. "Send a battle squadron to investigate," Vashtek ordered. "I want to know what happened to my ships." Back on Earth, Dr. Helen Brooks entered Admiral Carter's office carrying a thick data pad and several printed reports. She was a small woman with brown hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in every detail. As Earth's leading xenobiologist and diplomatic advisor, she had studied every known alien species in the galaxy. "Admiral, what I'm about to tell you is not encouraging," Brooks began, taking a seat across from Carter's desk. "The Vextai Empire controls 43 star systems and has been expanding steadily for over 2,000 years. They're a warrior culture that believes in conquest through superior force." Carter leaned back in her chair. "How do they treat conquered species?" "Badly," Brooks replied without hesitation. "They use them as slave labor in mining operations and construction projects. Most conquered species die within a few years of capture. The Vextai see other species as tools to be used until they break." "And they've never been defeated?" Brooks shook her head. "Never. They've fought wars against dozens of species, some with technology more advanced than ours. The Vextai always win because they're willing to use any level of violence necessary. They don't take prisoners in the traditional sense. They take slaves." Admiral Carter was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Finally, she looked up at Brooks. "Doctor, I need you to understand something. Jake Harrison wasn't just any captain. He's the officer who held the line at New Phoenix when everyone else said it was impossible. Amy Rodriguez graduated top of her class at the academy and had already been recommended for promotion. These weren't just any crew members. I understand the personal loss, Admiral, but we need to think about the bigger picture," Brooks said carefully. "If we respond with military force, we could provoke a war with an empire that has 43 star systems. Earth has colonies in only 6 systems. The mathematics are not in our favor." Carter stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city below. Millions of people went about their daily lives unaware that humanity might be facing its greatest threat since the development of faster-than-light travel. "You're recommending we do nothing?" Carter asked. "I'm recommending we be very careful about our next move," Brooks replied. "Perhaps we can work through the Galactic Council to negotiate some kind of prisoner exchange or tribute payment." Carter turned back to face her. "Doctor, you don't understand something about humans. We don't abandon our people. We don't pay tribute to bullies. And we sure as hell don't negotiate with slavers." Before Brooks could respond, Commander Blake entered the room quickly. "Admiral Colonel Ryan Mitchell is requesting permission to take a battle group to investigate the Horizon's disappearance." Carter looked at Brooks, then back at Blake. "Approved. Tell Mitchell he has authorization to take the Retribution, the Victory, and the Justice. Full Marine complement under Major Kate Sullivan." Brooks stood up quickly. "Admiral, this could be exactly the kind of escalation that starts a war we can't win." "Doctor," Carter said calmly, "we're already at war. The Vextai declared it when they attacked our people. The only question now is whether we're going to fight it or surrender without trying." In the Galactic Council chamber on Zentari Prime, emergency session lights flashed as delegates hurried to their seats. Ambassador Kethvar had called for an urgent meeting after receiving reports that human military vessels were moving toward the site of the Horizon incident. "Fellow council members," Kethvar announced, "we may be witnessing the beginning of the first major galactic conflict in over 300 years. Human military forces are mobilizing in response to the loss of their diplomatic vessel." Delegate Morden's aquatic form swirled nervously in his water sphere. "Perhaps we should send a mediation team to prevent further violence." "The Vextai don't accept mediation," rumbled Warlord Gashtek. "They see it as weakness. If the humans are foolish enough to attack Vextai forces, they will learn why 43 species serve the Empire as slaves." "What if the humans are not as weak as we assume?" asked Delegate Zortham. "The debris field contained Vextai ship fragments. Something happened to Commander Zethrak's patrol fleet." Kethvar nodded slowly. "That's what concerns me most. If the humans somehow destroyed 6 Vextai warships, they're either much more advanced than we thought, or much more dangerous." Colonel Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the EDF Retribution as his battle group prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. His weathered face showed the experience of 25 years in the Earth Defense Force, including combat operations during the colony wars and the asteroid mining conflicts. "Colonel, all vessels report ready for jump," announced his navigation officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim. Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing his 3 ships. The Retribution was Earth's newest heavy cruiser, equipped with the latest weapons and defensive systems. The Victory and Justice were older but reliable vessels that had served with distinction in previous conflicts. "Major Sullivan, are your Marines ready?" Mitchell asked over the intercom. "Ready and waiting, sir," came the reply from Major Kate Sullivan, whose elite Marine units were loaded in shuttles and ready for deployment. "My people are eager to find out what happened to Captain Harrison and his crew." Mitchell understood that feeling. The Earth Defense Force was a close community, especially among officers who had served in combat. Losing a ship and crew to unknown circumstances was something that affected everyone who wore the uniform. "Jump to coordinates," Mitchell ordered. The 3 ships disappeared in flashes of light, heading toward a confrontation that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. On Krexthul, High Warlord Vashtek received word that his battle squadron had reached the coordinates, where Commander Zethrak's fleet had vanished. The report that came back would shake the foundations of the Vextai Empire. "High Warlord," the squadron commander's voice crackled over the communication system. "We have found the patrol fleet." "About time," Vashtek snarled. "Where was Zethrak? Hiding?" There was a long pause before the reply came. "High Warlord, Commander Zethrak is dead. His entire fleet has been destroyed. But sir, there's something else. We're detecting human energy signatures throughout the debris field." Vashtek's blood ran cold. "What kind of signatures?" "Weapon signatures, sir. The humans didn't just survive the encounter. They fought back. And High Warlord, Based on the debris patterns, they won. For the first time in his long military career, High Warlord Vashtek felt something he had never experienced before when facing an enemy species. He felt concern about what he might be dealing with. The silence that had fallen over both empires was about to be broken by revelations that would terrify the galaxy. Colonel Ryan Mitchell's battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the coordinates where the EDF horizon had last been seen. What they found waiting for them changed everything anyone in the galaxy thought they knew about humanity. The core. Debris field stretched across several thousand kilometers of space. Twisted metal fragments drifted slowly in the darkness, reflecting the light from distant stars. But these weren't the remains of a human vessel. The debris bore the dark, angular markings of Vextai warships. Colonel, I'm reading 7 separate debris signatures, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from her position at the sensor station. All Vextai configuration. But sir, there's something else. Mitchell stepped closer to her console. What is it? The EDF horizon is here, sir. She's intact and powered down, but showing no signs of damage. On the main view screen, the image shifted to show the familiar hull of the human diplomatic vessel. The ship floated peacefully in the center of the debris field, like a predator resting among the bones of its prey. Life signs? Mitchell asked, hardly daring to hope. 23 human life signs aboard, sir. All alive. Mitchell felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by confusion. How had a single human diplomatic vessel survived an encounter with 6 Vextai warships? And where had the 7th ship come from? Open a channel to the horizon, Mitchell ordered. The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of the diplomatic vessel. Captain Jake Harrison sat calmly in his command chair, looking exactly as he had during their last communication 3 days ago. His uniform was clean and pressed, his expression relaxed. He looked like a man who had just finished reading a pleasant book, rather than someone who had survived a deadly space battle. Colonel Mitchell, Harrison said with a slight smile. Good to see you. I was wondering when someone would come looking for us. Mitchell stared at his fellow officer, trying to process what he was seeing. Jake, what the hell happened here? We've got debris from 7 Vextai warships scattered across half the system. Harrison's expression didn't change. They made a mistake, Ryan. They threatened my crew. Behind Harrison, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez turned from her station. She looked perfectly normal. No signs of stress or injury. Chief Engineer Ben Murphy was visible in the background, working on his console as if nothing unusual had happened. Jake, I need a full report, Mitchell said. How did you destroy 7 Vextai? Warships with a diplomatic vessel? We didn't destroy anything, Ryan, Harrison replied calmly. We simply defended ourselves when they made it clear they intended to harm my people. Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing the debris field. The wreckage patterns didn't match any known weapon signatures. The Vextai ships hadn't been blown apart by missiles or energy weapons. They had been taken apart systematically, as if someone had found every weak point in their design and exploited it simultaneously. Permission to come aboard, Mitchell requested. Of course, Harrison replied. Amy will meet your shuttle in the cargo bay. 20 minutes later, Mitchell found himself walking through the corridors of the horizon with Major Kate Sullivan and a small security team. The ship looked completely normal. The walls were clean, the lighting was standard, and the crew members, they passed nodded politely as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez met them at the entrance to the bridge. Her dark hair was still pulled back in its regulation ponytail, and her brown eyes showed no signs of trauma or stress. Colonel Mitchell, Major Sullivan, she said with a smile. Captain Harrison is waiting for you. They followed her onto the bridge, where Jake Harrison stood looking out at the debris field through the main view screen. He turned as they entered, his expression friendly and welcoming. Ryan, good to see you again, Harrison said, extending his hand for a handshake. I hope the trip out here wasn't too uncomfortable. Mitchell shook his hand, studying Harrison's face for any signs of what he had been through. Jake, I need to understand what happened here. Earth Command is going crazy trying to figure out how you survived. Harrison gestured toward the chairs around the small conference table at the back of the bridge. Have a seat, it's not a complicated story. As they sat down, Ben Murphy joined them from the engineering station. His red hair was still messy and his hands showed recent work stains, but he looked relaxed and content. The Vextai commander, Zethrak, made his intentions very clear, Harrison began. He wanted to take our ship, enslave our crew, and force us to work in their mining colonies until we died. When I declined his generous offer, he decided to take what he wanted by force. How many ships attacked you? Major Sullivan asked. 6 initially, Harrison replied. They fired warning shots and then sent boarding parties. 3 more ships arrived about 4 hours later when the first group failed to report in. Mitchell leaned forward. Jake, the debris out there came from military-grade Vextai warships. How did you fight them off? Harrison was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to explain something complicated to children. Ryan, do you remember the siege of New Phoenix during the Martian conflict? Of course. You held off 3 rebel divisions with a single battalion. How did we do that? Mitchell thought back to the battle reports he had studied at the academy. You used superior tactics and took advantage of their overconfidence. You made them fight on your terms instead of theirs. Harrison nodded. Same principle here. The Vextai have been winning battles for thousands of years using the same basics. Approach. Overwhelming force, direct assault, intimidation through superior numbers. They've never fought an enemy that could think faster than they could react. But they had 6 warships, Sullivan protested. Even with superior tactics, you were still outnumbered and outgunned. Amy Rodriguez spoke up from her position at the navigation console. Major, they made a critical error when they boarded our ship. They assumed we would panic and surrender like every other species they've encountered. What happened when they boarded? Mitchell asked. Harrison's expression became more serious. They hurt Ben when he tried to protect Amy. They threatened to take her as a prize for their commander. That's when they learned that humans don't react to threats the way other species do. Ben Murphy rolled up his sleeve to show a healing wound on his forearm. One of them cut me with some kind of blade weapon when I got between him and Amy. Not a deep cut, but it made their intentions pretty clear. Mitchell looked around at the 3 crew members, all of whom seemed completely calm despite describing what should have been a terrifying experience. What did you do? We taught them about human problem-solving skills, Harrison replied simply. They wanted to capture us alive, which meant they had to be careful about how much damage they did to our ship. We didn't have that limitation when it came to their vessels. You disabled their ships? We studied them, Amy Rodriguez said. While they were busy trying to break into our secure sections, we were learning everything about their technology, their tactics, and their psychology. Humans are very good at learning, Colonel. Harrison stood and walked to the view screen, looking out at the floating debris. The Vextai have been using the same ship designs, the same weapons, and the same battle tactics for centuries. Once we understood their patterns, it became a matter of simple logistics. Logistics? Sullivan asked. How to disable 9 warships with minimal damage to our own vessel, Harrison explained. It took about 18 hours of careful work, but we managed it. Mitchell stared at him. 18 hours? Jake, you're talking about this like it was a maintenance problem, not a life-or-death battle. Harrison turned back to face him. That's because it wasn't really a battle, Ryan. It was a demonstration of why you should never threaten human civilians. The Vextai learned that lesson, though I doubt they'll live long enough to pass it on to the rest of their empire. The crews of, those ships? Dead, Ben Murphy said matter-of-factly. They made it clear they would rather die than surrender. We accommodated their preference. Major Sullivan looked at the tactical display showing the debris patterns. Colonel, these weren't destroyed by any weapons I recognize. How did they do this? Harrison sat back down at the table. Kate, what's the first thing they teach you about space combat at the academy? Know your enemy's weaknesses and exploit them. Exactly. Every ship design has weaknesses. Every weapon system has limitations. Every crew has predictable responses to specific situations. The Vextai have been relying on fear and overwhelming force for so long that they forgot about the importance of adaptation and creativity. Mitchell was beginning to understand, though the implications terrified him. You're saying you analyzed their ships and found ways to destroy them that they couldn't defend against. We found ways to convince their ships to destroy themselves, Amy Rodriguez corrected. Much more efficient than using our limited weapons against their heavy armor. The bridge fell silent as Mitchell and Sullivan processed what they were hearing. These three humans had not just survived an encounter with 9 Vextai warships. They had systematically eliminated them, while treating the entire situation as a technical problem to be solved. "Jake," Mitchell said finally, "do you realize what this means? You've just proven that the Vextai Empire can be defeated. The entire galactic balance of power could change." News of the Vextai fleet's destruction spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Communication networks that usually carried trade reports and diplomatic messages now buzzed with rumors and speculation about the impossible victory of a single human ship over 9 Vextai warships. On the Vextai homeworld of Krexthul, High Warlord Vashtek stood in his war room surrounded by his military advisors. The massive holographic display showed the locations of every Vextai fleet across their 43 star systems. Red warning lights blinked at dozens of positions where human activity had been detected. "How many fleets have we lost contact with?" Vashtek demanded, his yellow eyes burning with rage. General Krixmol, his chief military advisor, consulted his datapad with trembling claws. 17 patrol groups, High Warlord, all in sectors where human vessels have been detected. 17? Vashtek's voice rose to a roar that echoed through the metal walls. "How is this possible? We are talking about over 100 warships. High Warlord, the reports from our surviving scouts are disturbing," Krixmol said carefully. "The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered before." Vashtek leaned over the tactical display, his massive hands gripping the edge of the table. "Explain." "They do not engage in direct combat. Instead, they study our ships and crews, then use that knowledge against us. Captain Threxval of the 7th Fleet reported that humans somehow convinced his ship's computers to shut down life support. Commander Yithkar's squadron was destroyed when their own weapons overloaded simultaneously." The war room fell silent, except for the humming of the holographic projectors. Every Vextai officer present understood the implications. Their empire was built on military superiority, but that superiority meant nothing if the enemy could turn their own technology against them. Meanwhile, across human space, ordinary citizens were discovering they possessed capabilities no one had expected. The news of Captain Harrison's victory had awakened something in the human population, a recognition that they were not helpless victims of alien aggression. Captain Steve Anderson had been running cargo shipments between Earth colonies for 15 years. His merchant vessel, the Lucky Strike, was old and slow, designed for carrying freight rather than fighting battles. When 3 Vextai interceptors tried to capture his ship near the Centauri system, Anderson expected to become another casualty of the expanding conflict. Instead, he found himself calmly analyzing the attack patterns of the alien vessels, while his small crew worked to implement defensive measures. Within 6 hours, all 3 Vextai ships had suffered critical system failures that left them drifting helplessly in space. "I don't understand it myself," Anderson reported to Earth Command. "We just looked at their ships like they were broken machines that needed fixing. Turns out they had a lot of things that needed fixing." Similar reports came in from across human territory. Dr. Patricia Lewis, a civilian researcher studying alien artifacts on the colony world of New Geneva, single-handedly infiltrated and disabled a Vextai command center that had been established to coordinate attacks on human settlements. "They left their computer systems completely open," Lewis explained to the astonished colonial authorities. "No security protocols, no encryption, no backup safeguards. It was like they had never considered the possibility that someone might want to access their data without permission." General Chris Parker, commanding the defense of the Mars orbital stations, faced a Vextai assault force of 24 ships, with only 6 human vessels under his command. The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of the attacking fleet. More disturbing to galactic observers was Parker's after-action report. "We didn't just defeat them," Parker wrote. "We convinced them to forget how to operate their own ships. By the end of the engagement, The surviving Vextai crews were so confused they couldn't even find their way back to their home systems. The Galactic Council emergency sessions became daily occurrences as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Ambassador Kethvar found himself struggling to maintain order as hundreds of species demanded explanations for humanity's sudden military dominance. The situation has moved beyond our ability to mediate, Kethvar announced to the assembled delegates. Humanity is not simply winning battles against the Vextai Empire, they are systematically dismantling it. Delegate Mordoon's aquatic form swirled nervously in his containment sphere. How is this possible? The Vextai military machine has conquered species with technology far more advanced than humanity's. That may be exactly the problem, observed Delegate Zortham, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights. The Vextai have always relied on superior technology and overwhelming force. They have never faced an enemy that could think faster than they could adapt. Warlord Gashtek, whose own species had barely survived their first encounter with Vextai expansion centuries ago, spoke with grudging respect. I have reviewed the battle reports. The humans are not using advanced weapons or superior numbers. They are using intelligence as a weapon. What do you mean? Asked Delegate Yixthara, her insectoid features clicking with curiosity. They learn, Gashtek replied simply. Every engagement teaches them more about Vextai technology, tactics, and psychology. Then they use that knowledge in the next battle. The Vextai are fighting an enemy that becomes more dangerous with every encounter. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter reviewed the flood of reports coming in from human forces across the galaxy. What she was seeing defied everything she thought she knew about warfare and human capabilities. Dr. Brooks, I need you to explain something to me, Carter said as the xenobiologist entered her office. 6 months ago, our military analysts said we couldn't possibly stand against the Vextai Empire. Now we're destroying their fleets faster than they can deploy them. Dr. Helen Brooks sat down, her expression troubled. Admiral, I think we've discovered something about humanity that we never fully understood. When humans are threatened, particularly when their families and communities are in danger, they don't just fight back. They solve the problem. Solve the problem? Think about human history, Brooks explained. When faced with natural disasters, diseases, or hostile environments, humans don't just survive. They figure out how to prevent those problems from happening again. They build better shelters, develop medicines, create technologies to control their environment. Carter began to understand. You're saying we're treating the Vextai Empire like a natural disaster? Exactly. To most species, the Vextai represent an insurmountable military threat. To humans, they represent a problem that needs to be solved permanently. And humans are very good at solving problems. The communication panel on Carter's desk chimed with an incoming priority message. The image of Colonel Ryan Mitchell appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Admiral, we have a situation developing near the Vega system, Mitchell reported. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Vextai fleet moving toward human space. I'm reading over 300 ships. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. 300 ships? Yes, ma'am. It appears High Warlord Vashitek is committing the entire Vextai military to a final assault on Earth. Brooks leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, this is exactly what I was afraid of. If the Vextai launch a full-scale attack, they could overwhelm even our newfound abilities. Carter studied the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. 300 Vextai warships represented the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Even with humanity's recent victories, the odds seemed impossible. Colonel Mitchell, what's the status of our defensive forces? We have 47 ships in position around Earth, Admiral. Captain Harrison's group is moving to intercept, but they'll be heavily outnumbered. Carter made a decision that would determine the fate of both species. Tell Captain Harrison he has full authorization to engage the enemy fleet. And Colonel? Yes, Admiral. Remind him that the entire galaxy is watching. Whatever happens in this battle will determine how every species in the galaxy views humanity for generations to come. As the communication ended, Carter turned to Brooks. Doctor, do you think we can win against those odds? Brooks was quiet for a long moment, considering everything they had learned about human capabilities in recent weeks. Admiral, 3 months, ago I would have said it was impossible, but I've learned something about my own species recently. When humans are fighting to protect their home, they don't just try to win battles, they end wars. Outside Earth's orbital defense stations, 47 human ships prepared to face the largest invasion force in galactic history. The crews of those vessels knew they were outnumbered 7-1, but they also knew something the Vextai had learned too late. Humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought to solve problems permanently, and the Vextai Empire had become a problem that needed solving. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the galaxy held its breath to see whether humanity's strange gift for turning impossible situations into manageable problems would be enough to save them from complete destruction. High Warlord Vashtek's invasion fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward Earth with the intention of ending the human threat once and for all. High Warlord Vashtek stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominator, as his massive invasion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 300 Vextai warships spread out in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had conquered 43 star systems over 2,000 years. "All ships report ready for battle, High Warlord," announced his fleet commander, General Thexmar. Long-range sensors detect 47 human vessels in defensive positions around their homeworld. Vashtek's yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The humans had shown they could defeat small Vextai forces through trickery and deception, but they could not possibly stand against the entire military might of the Empire. This battle would restore Vextai dominance and serve as a warning to every species in the galaxy. "Begin the advance," Vashtek ordered. "Destroy any human vessel that refuses to surrender." The Vextai fleet moved forward like a dark tide, their engines leaving trails of light across the darkness of space. They expected to find terrified human defenders fleeing before their overwhelming numbers. Instead, they found Captain Jake Harrison waiting for them in a single ship. The EDF Determination floated alone between the advancing Vextai fleet and Earth's orbital defenses. It was a small vessel, similar to the diplomatic ship that had started this conflict weeks ago. Against 300 warships, it looked like an insect facing a storm. "Human vessel," Vashtek's voice boomed across the communication channels. "You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Harrison's image appeared on the Vextai flagship's main screen. He sat calmly in his captain's chair, his expression relaxed and confident. Behind him, the bridge of the Determination showed only a handful of crew members working quietly at their stations. "High Warlord Vashtek," Harrison said politely. "I'm Captain Jake Harrison of the Earth Defense Force. I believe we need to have a conversation." Vashtek laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through his ship's corridors. "The time for conversation is over, human. You have embarrassed my empire for the last time. Prepare to watch your homeworld burn." "I don't think that's going to happen," Harrison replied calmly. "You see, we've learned quite a lot about your people over the past few weeks. Your technology, your tactics, your psychology. We understand how your empire works now. Understanding will not save you from 300 warships," Vashtek snarled. Harrison smiled slightly. "High Warlord, you're thinking about this the wrong way. This isn't a battle between 300 ships and one. This is a demonstration of what happens when humans decide to solve a problem permanently." Before Vashtek could respond, something impossible began to happen throughout his fleet. Ships that had functioned perfectly for decades suddenly started experiencing system failures. Navigation computers began displaying incorrect coordinates. Weapons systems powered down without authorization. Life support systems fluctuated between too hot and too cold. "What is happening?" Vashtek demanded, turning to his technical officers. "Unknown, High Warlord," stammered the chief engineer. "All systems are malfunctioning simultaneously. It's as if our ships are forgetting how to operate." On the bridge of the Determination, Harrison watched the Vextai fleet's confusion with professional interest. "You built your entire civilization on conquest through superior force," he explained to Vashtek. "But you never considered what would happen if you encountered a species that was simply better at understanding how things work." Admiral Lisa Carter watched the confrontation from Earth's command center, surrounded by military advisors and government officials. The tactical display showed the Vextai fleet struggling with inexplicable technical problems, while Harrison's single ship remained untouched. "How is he doing this?" whispered Dr. Helen Brooks, who stood beside Carter's command chair. "He's not doing anything," Carter replied, understanding dawning in her voice. "He's proving a point." On the flagship, Vashitek's rage was building to a dangerous level. "Fire all weapons at the human ship. Destroy them now." His weapons officer tried to comply, but the targeting systems refused to lock onto Harrison's vessel. "High Warlord, our weapons will not respond. The computers say there is no target to engage." "The ship is right there," Vashtek roared, pointing at the view screen showing the determination floating calmly in space. "Yes, High Warlord, but our targeting computers insist there is nothing there to shoot at." Harrison's voice came over the communication system again, calm and patient like a teacher explaining a simple concept to confused students. "High Warlord, for the past 3 weeks, every time your forces encountered humans, we studied everything about your technology, your ship designs, your computer systems, your weapon configurations. We learned how everything works." More Vextai ships began to lose power entirely, drifting helplessly as their crews struggled to understand what was happening to systems that had operated reliably for centuries. "Once we understood your technology completely," Harrison continued, "it became a simple matter of convincing your ships that they didn't want to fight anymore. Your computers are very obedient. They'll do exactly what they're told as long as they believe the orders are legitimate." Vashtek stared at the human captain in growing horror. "You hacked our entire fleet?" "We didn't hack anything," Harrison corrected. "We simply taught your systems to make better decisions. Your ships are now smart enough to recognize that attacking Earth would be a mistake." Throughout the Vextai fleet, crews watched in amazement as their vessels began to shut down non-essential systems and assume defensive postures. Ships that had been ready for battle moments before now floated peacefully, their weapons powered down and their shields configured for protection rather than attack. "This is impossible," Vashtek whispered. "Our ships have built-in safeguards against external control." "Your safeguards work perfectly," Harrison agreed, "but they assume that anyone giving orders to your ships understands technology the way Vextai do. Humans understand technology differently. We don't just learn how to use it, we learn how to improve it." General Thexmar approached Vashtek with a datapad in his trembling claws. "High Warlord, I'm receiving reports from across our empire. Human forces are appearing in every system we control. They're not attacking our colonies or destroying our infrastructure. They're teaching our people." "Teaching them what?" "How to live without slaves, sir. How to build things instead of taking them from others. How to solve problems through cooperation instead of conquest." Vashtek looked around his bridge at officers who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. For the first time in his life, he saw doubt in their eyes. Not doubt about their loyalty, but doubt about whether the Vextai way of life was the only possible way to exist. Harrison's image remained on the view screen, patient and understanding. "High Warlord, I'm going to offer you the same choice we've offered every Vextai force we've encountered. You can surrender and learn to live peacefully with other species, or you can continue fighting and watch your civilization disappear entirely. You would destroy us all?" "We don't want to destroy anyone," Harrison replied, "but we will solve the problem you represent permanently. The choice is whether that solution involves your survival or not." Vashtek looked at his fleet of 300 ships, all now floating helplessly under the control of human technology they couldn't even comprehend. He thought about the reports from across his empire, describing human forces that didn't conquer territory, but instead convinced populations to abandon the warrior culture that had defined Vextai society for millennia. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. "We want you to stop enslaving other species," Harrison said simply. "We want you to learn how to build things instead of stealing them. We want you to discover that cooperation is more effective than conquest. And if we refuse," Harrison's expression became more serious, "then we'll teach your ships to fly themselves back to your homeworld and convince your people to find new leadership. High Warlord, humans don't just win wars. We end the problems that cause wars." The bridge of the Eternal Dominator fell silent, except for the humming of systems that no longer obeyed Vextai commands. Vashtek realized that his choice was not between victory and defeat. It was between adaptation and extinction. "I surrender," he said quietly. 6 months later, Ambassador Kethvar stood before the Galactic Council as representatives from the former Vextai Empire took their seats for the first time as equals rather than conquerors. The warrior culture that had terrorized the galaxy for 2,000 years had been replaced by a society focused on engineering, agriculture, and peaceful trade. "The transformation has been remarkable," Kethvar reported. "Former Vextai military officers are now working as teachers and engineers. Their former slave colonies have become independent trading partners. The species that once spread fear across 43 star systems now contributes to galactic prosperity." Delegate Morden's aquatic form swirled thoughtfully in his containment sphere. "How did the humans accomplish such a complete change so quickly?" "They didn't change the Vextai," Kethvar replied. "They simply showed them that there were better ways to solve their problems.